Steve, it's summertime, it's July, and that means in the world of e-commerce, we're thinking about one thing and one thing only, and that's Black Friday in November. It is already time for people to start preparing for Black Friday and start thinking about what they're going to be doing. So today we wanted to take the chance to talk about promotions, largely discounts, but you can extrapolate the same principles to all sorts of promotions that you might run, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it seems far away, but it'll be on us soon. And you're right, the planning cycle starts very early for this. So let's jump into it.
Let's do it.
Um,
Okay. So walk me through what are the kind of core types of promos that we'll be thinking about here.
yeah, so really anything that's sort of a temporary sales driver you can think of, usually coupled with a discount. So there's all types of, we could break discounts down into the many different types of discounts there are. But thinking about like sign up discounts, retention discounts, maybe an email you send to someone who added to cart and they didn't complete a checkout, something like that. Maybe a referral discount. There's a whole lot on the space of discounts. Then you've got your kind of buy one get one type promotions. You've got free gift giveaways. On your second purchase, receive swag of some sort or anything like that.
It is funny how at the end of the day, kind of no matter what amalgamation you put forth for your promotion, it in some way really just is a discount, right? Like buy one get one is essentially a 50% discount, except you have a requirement to buy two things, right? We know we're discounting, we know we're talking about promos here. The less scientific, less data backed brands just look at, this is my average revenue in a week or a month. I ran a promo and this is what my revenue jumped up to. Is that the right way to think about measuring the impact of a promotion?
When we think about kind of overall effectiveness of promotions and ROI, there's really kind of a number of components that we want to make sure we're factoring into our calculation, right? In the simplest, kind of do it and leave it alone world, that's what people would do, or they'd look at redemptions of a promotion code and kind of do like a very quick incrementality estimate. But in order to be more precise and really understand what the cost benefit of this promotion was, it kind of four major components. One is, kind of your direct sales impact, right? And so when we talk about sales impact, we're talking about incremental sales, people who bought who otherwise would not have bought, right? Because your promotion is likely going to hit, a lot or mostly people who are already customers or would have been customers. And so when these people purchase, you don't want to consider them as part of your sales spike during that period. And so in that sense, using just kind of coupon redemptions as your metric for these are the sales this promotion drove, that is very quickly going to lead you in the wrong direction. So you want to make sure you understand like what your baseline sales are during that period. You want to make sure you're capturing just kind of the incremental sales of that. We'll talk a little bit more about, what else to look at in incremental sales in our kind of third bucket here. But for our second bucket, after the direct sales impact, you also want to make sure you're capturing any sort of halo effects or add-ons here. In the simplest view of the term, your halo impact is going to be if you promoted one product, what was the sales impact to your other products? You want to make sure you're capturing kind of the whole range of things here, especially if you've got kind of a product with complementary add-ons, right? You promoted that kind of core product. What did people buy for these other products, right? Or if you're promoting kind of like a niche product or kind of a loss leader, like how did that impact your main product line? So just making sure you're taking that all into account. That's all going to be captured if you're doing sort of a site-wide discount. This becomes less relevant. But just thinking about how your different products interact with each other. What do people buy together? We've talked about basket combinations in the past, but this is where having a really good understanding of that is really going to be able to, help you understand this better. Our third bucket, kind of in the minus column, is going to be our cannibalization, and so this is going to come in the form of sales cannibalization and then the costs associated with it. So when you think about like revenue cannibalization, right? We talked about this is who would have bought anyway, and this can be really tricky to measure. We talked about having that baseline view of your sales, but you're also going to want to look at the before and after periods here, particularly relevant if you're running a holiday promotion. That's where the pull back effect is actually going to be more important to look at here. But what these terms are, pull forward and pull back, is the sales immediately before and after your promotion. If those take a dip because people were expecting a promotion, that's something you need to make sure you're capturing, right? That is part of your baseline. That is not incremental to those weeks. And so during the Black Friday sale, like the easiest way to look at this would be, okay, the week leading up to a Black Friday promotion, if you're a brand that consistently does Black Friday promotions year over year, or even if you're a newer brand, people might be expecting that you're going to do a Black Friday promotion, right? And so If you start attributing all these incremental sales you see on Black Friday, Cyber Monday to true incrementality, you're going to be over clubbing this, right? Because people in a normal week would have bought those throughout the week. That's what we'd call pull back, where people would have bought it earlier. And then you've got your pull forward, which is similar, and this you'd see during holiday periods as well. But even outside of that, if people come across your brand, maybe they would have bought within the next few weeks. But if it's on promotion at that point and they were thinking about buying it, they're probably going to buy it at that point. Understanding just like what your sales trend line looks like during the before after period can be very important, particularly for holidays. So that's kind of the revenue cannibalization, like what would you have gotten anyway? And then there's the cost piece of this, which is the discount you gave away to those customers who would have bought anyway. So you want to make sure you're not capturing those sales in your incremental sales, but you also need to make sure you're backing that cost out of your overall, because it is going to reduce your average margin during the promotion period because you're, collecting less on price. Your COGS stay the same. And so your overall margin is going to take a dip. So making sure you're factoring that into your equation. And then lastly, on kind of the incremental side and just understand the full kind of range of your impact, you want to make sure you have a really good view of customer lifetime value, right? And customer lifetime value is something that John and I obviously talk a lot about. And so understanding what are your customer LTV indicators and how valuable are those customers that you pulled in on promotion in your long term, right? So there's the immediate sales and what you expect from those customers in the future. Now, it could be really tempting if you have like an average LTV that you use. Be careful of applying that average in this scenario because you don't really know that your customers that you pulled in on promotion are as valuable as your average customer, right? And oftentimes these are going to be your one-time shoppers. And so this is where like having a really robust LTV segmentation and understanding of what drives your high value customers and what drives your low value customers is going to be really important because as you see your customers being brought in by these promotions, you're going to want to understand what bucket do these customers likely fall in based on what I know. And then last note,
And
just on calculating the ROI, you want to make sure you're factoring in the cost of actually running this promotion, right? So kind of operational costs, make sure you're considering.
on the LTV one, it feels like that pairs really well with the kind of pull forward impact. So it's kind of from the same vein, right? Like if it's an existing customer and you pull forward their sale, you could make it a case, and for many brands, this will be true that actually ends up being a great investment because now you've increased the timeline for when their next order will be. Maybe you've gotten them to increase consumption or add a new product line to their cart, right? Or similarly, like if it's something they're going to buy once a year and they're only going to buy one from you once a year, if they pull it forward and get on a discount, that hurts your one-time sale. Similarly for new acquisitions, oftentimes we do see that people who are acquired during big promo times are one-time buyers, right? Especially end of year buyers, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that whole kind of stretch, but kind of through the holiday period, there's a lot of one-time shoppers there around gift giving and around trying to just find the biggest discounts. And so to your point, like we need to understand what kind of tier are they going to fall into from an LTV and behavior perspective? Should you expect them to have repeat purchases down the road, or is this a one time and go? And that really changes the economics of your promo.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a lot of things we need to look into to decide and evaluate the efficacy and the ROI we're getting. So how do you functionally do all the things you just said?
So, like a lot of the things we talked about, there's sort of varying levels of sophistication, right? And ultimately, the important thing to do is have a way that you're calculating this that improves over time, right? And so, in your sort of simpler side of things, right? Like you can look at comp periods from year ago, right? Like comparison periods, you can look at a good comparison period for your brand. So just making sure you're not comparing a seasonal period to a non-seasonal period or something like that. If you need to look like same time last year, if you need to look at kind of month over month, that's gonna be different depending on your brand. But having a really strong comp period and understanding what your percentage growth over that period was is going to be really important. This will be tricky for brands that are growing very rapidly because if you're looking year over year, you're going to have very different baseline sales, and so trying to isolate that percentage lift is going to be tricky. You might have to triangulate it from a few different sources, kind of month to month and kind of year over year. looking at. Your simple pre-post test, I call it simple, but it can also be very powerful, right? It might not give you an exact number, but it can give you directionally strong guidance if you're going to look at, a pre-post again during a non-seasonal period. This can get kind of start to get you there during to towards a closer estimate if you're doing it at an okay time of year to be doing it. Then there's kind of your more complicated methods. We've talked about media mix models and linear regressions before. If you have a media mix model that your brand is using and you feel good about, right, you'd want to be controlling for promotions generally within that anyway to capture these spikes. And so understanding what are each of your promotions looking like in that model, and that can be a powerful tool for that. Or if you don't have an ongoing media mix model that you're using and maintaining, you can run a linear regression on these things and look at all of your baseline variables and your advertised variables in combination with your promotion variables, right, and start to understand what's your baseline level of sales and what did your promotion drive from an incremental standpoint. Um, and then like when we think about best practices for testing here, right? Like there's a lot of, I'd say, aspirational things that you'd want to be able to measure these things. It's not always going to be possible, but to the extent you can, having a random holdout, right, for a promotion that you're doing. If you're doing a site-wide promotion, this becomes a lot harder, right? Like a site-wide sign-up discount, you can't really have holdout groups for that as easily. If you're doing a Black Friday promotion, you can't really have a holdout for that. But if you're doing targeted email promotions throughout the year, it does make sense to not target a specific subsegment of your customers and be able to use those findings to understand what that promotion truly drove, because you've got that random holdout set. Um, the other thing you could do is try to execute promotions during a non-seasonal period, right? So if you're trying to understand your effectiveness of your Black Friday promotions, that's going to be very hard because that is when your seasonal spike is, promotion or not. And it's not really feasible to not run Black Friday promotions to understand what the difference between last year's sales and this year's sales were, right? There's just not enough opportunities throughout the year to make up that amount of sales for most brands. But what you can do is run a non-seasonal promotion that sort of mirrors your Black Friday promotion or what you're planning on doing, understanding the lift during that period. And then you can sort of apply those findings to, when you do your Black Friday measurement and say like, okay, like do these things sort of triangulate, hit the same way, right? Like if you find, your sales uplift was 10% during your non-seasonal period, right? You can start to think about like, okay, maybe that's like the true value of our promotion during Black Friday, right? So it's going to be kind of pulling these different data points from various areas to sort of build this overall picture. The important thing to remember here is it's all about moving towards a better and better estimate, right? And so if you're not nailing something perfectly, if you don't feel like you like have the exact calculation ROI down to within like 10 cents, like that's not a realistic goal off the bat. The idea is to understand how these things get better over time and refining your estimates over and over again.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal point because even executing these similar promos outside of Black Friday, you aren't going to have the same sort of spike in traffic. The costs associated with ad campaigns go up. Buyer behavior does just change. But if you can blend and understand the impact of 10% off versus 20% off, or BOGO versus $10 off, or whatever, it's about figuring out directionally what is the lift, what is the cost, what is the value of different formats, different magnitudes of promotion, and then being able to kind of superimpose that with historical lifts from Black Friday. And now you can start to be smart about this and figure out and plan out, how much inventory do you need to have ready to go for Black Friday, Cyber Monday? How much of a lift are you expecting? And what's the cost going to be versus with the ROI and how much you're going to get out of that? You can start to put together a more data backed approach that allows you to really not just have a top line lift during your key promo periods, but actually have a bottom line lift where you are netting out substantially more profitably.
Yeah, agree. And again, like one of the things that's great about these types of analysis, and we've talked about this before too, is most of this measurement, kind of particularly on the directional side, is available with data that you already have, right? And so like a lot of these trends you'll be able to find in your point of sale data. What makes a high value LTV customer, right? You've got data on when your promotion's executed. You've got data on like what the depth of discount was. And so all of these things, the great thing about these analysis is it's there. It's just you have to find the time to analyze it, right? And that's where it goes back to saying do what you can immediately and then improve on it over time, right? You're not going to just all of a sudden build a robust MMM overnight, media mix model, and have that ready to go. But you can start to put together some of these other views to triangulate your effectiveness and your ROI.
And similarly, right? Like that's why it's important to take these considerations throughout the year, right? Like you can't create a holdout group after the fact. So if you're going to make a change, if you can feasibly set up a holdout group, always do it because that makes it so much easier down the line, even if it's a year later, to go back and figure out what the lift and impact was. Um, if you can start to think about your promos throughout the year as being tests and preparation for your key times of year, right? We keep saying Black Friday, Cyber Monday. For some brands, it might be a different time of year, right? Maybe it's a back to school, maybe it's a summer sale, maybe it's a winter sale, whatever. But whatever your key kind of tent pole moments are, the rest of the year is a chance for you to optimize towards those and to raise your baseline. And so treating them as tests and not as like an emergency spike, or just like we need to get sales up, let's just do this. Like be a little bit more deliberate and it will pay off across the year and for years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that topic, as we talk about like years to come and future tests, right? Like think about what you'd ultimately love to be able to measure and just think about the steps you need to take like now to be able to start building the foundation for the incremental building blocks of effectiveness that'll get you there, right? And so if you'd ultimately like to understand like which of your products attract your most incremental sales, think about how you can set up tests and promotions in the meantime to start to gather that data to understand that, right? Like, do you understand now, are you more likely to see a strong halo impact from your flagship products versus your kind of complementary products or your loss leaders, right? Like start to think about how you could design tests now to understand that, a few weeks or months or years from now, right? And then think about like, which of your first time product purchases are most likely to draw in your high LTV people, right? Because those could be very strong candidates for promotion, right? If you understand that like, these are the products that our customers are incredibly satisfied with. We know that people who buy this on their first purchase return a second, third, fourth, fifth time, right? Like that could be a good candidate for promotion as well. So just thinking about these things and understanding, how that kind of builds your overall kind of 360 view of your customer.
And the opposite, right? There are going to be products where you don't have repeat purchase afterwards.
Hmm.
If you cut, if you put a discount on that, you are permanently cutting that LTV. And so, you know, the coin has two sides. There's going to be products that you want to merchandise because they will attract repeat buyers. They um, bring people in and have high first time sales, all that. There's going to be products that have low first time sales or have low repeat purchase rates correlated with them, um, or low AOVs or whatever, right? And so figuring out at a SKU by SKU level how promos impact them, but also how it just impacts user behavior, um, and the types of customers you would acquire.
Absolutely.
Okay, Steve, this was super helpful. Do you want to just give me the speed round for anybody coming in late? Um, what are the 30-second version of everything we just spoke about?
Yeah, so thinking about how you're measuring your effectiveness and ROI, right? Like think about the four main buckets. One is your direct sales impact. Two is your halo effect if you're promoting specific products. Three is netting out your cannibalization, both from your sales and then the cost of promotion to your cannibalized sales. Um, and then think about your customer lifetime value of your new customer acquisitions that you're pulling in on this promotion, right? Like what's the long-term impact of them going to be? How does that compare to your average customer LTV? And then you net that out against the overall cost of running your promotion to understand what your overall ROI is. In order to get those metrics, right? Because those are pretty simple to say. Have these metrics and plug them into your equation. Think about how you want to set up your tests and your analysis to gather these KPIs, right? There's a simple way, there's kind of a more advanced way, and then there's kind of a best practice way. In a best practice way, you really want to be able to isolate and have holdout groups, and maybe do some promotions during non-seasonal periods when you can expect your data to be relatively stable. If you've got the tools to do a regression model or a media mix model with your promotion data, do that. And in the absence of those things, like look at your pre-post periods, look at specific comparable periods for your brand. Make sure you're choosing these as carefully as possible to avoid any kind of data bias there. But the important thing is that you're measuring things, you're gathering your KPIs, and you're continuing to improve your kind of testing and measurement strategy over time.
Love it. Thank you so much, Steve. And everyone, good luck as you get ready for this fall.